Police officers and first responders absolutely suck at relationships. Depending on what study you look at, the police officer culture has up to a 70% divorce rate. And outside of that, for those that do stay together, many times the marriage or relationship is in absolute shambles. You're just roommates, you're staying in the relationship for the sake of the kids, and it is just simply not a healthy marriage. In this video, I'm going to share what I've seen over the past 25 years as a police officer, and I'm also going to go inside my own marriage of almost 28 years and tell you 3 of the key things that helped us make it through. Let's get into it.
Finally, some good news.
What's going on, everybody? If you're new to this channel, thanks for dropping by. My name is Aaron Smith, retired police officer, first responder wellness coach, and licensed brain health trainer. I help burned out first responders come back from mental and emotional burnout, relationship burnout, so that they can live the life that they were intended to live and reclaim what's important to them. Getting into this video, it's clear that police officers and first responders are not good at marriage and relationships. Depending on what study you see, there's up to a 70% divorce rate. Most first responder couples maybe stay together for the sake of the kids. They stay together because it's financially beneficial to them, and or they're waiting for the kids to grow up and get out of the house. And quite frankly, that's no way to live.
Amen.
In my 25-year career as a police officer, I had seen several couples that I thought were rock solid. I thought they will never get divorced, they will never get separated, only to see after 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, it was broken up. There was an affair that took place. They grew apart and could no longer get along and ended up getting a divorce. And I'm also going to share a little bit about being married for almost 28 years, making it through a 25-year career in law enforcement, and coming out the other side with my marriage intact. It wasn't pretty. There was a lot of struggles, and most of those struggles came closer to retirement after that 20-year mark. So what happens here? And the thing is, there's good news. I'm going to show you some of the main things that we struggle with and how to fix those. So first off, let me start by saying this. If you are not willing to put in the work, if you're not willing to be vulnerable and listen, if you're not willing to communicate and you're trying to just get your spouse to agree with you, or you're going to change them because, hey, you're the first responder, you have the stressful job, and they should understand you, go to another video because this simply isn't going to work. You have to come into this with a willingness to put in the hard work, a willingness to communicate, and to change your own actions before you can expect to see the actions of your spouse change and this thing come together. And that's very difficult because a lot of times when couples get together to begin working on situations, what happens? There's emotions involved. The person wants to be right. They want to get their point across, and things can go sideways very quickly. And also the work that's involved behind the scenes, it makes you sit and think, and you just have to drop a lot of pride. And you have to be vulnerable, which is extremely hard for us because if you're not vulnerable in communicating, you're not going to get across what you need to get across. So that's first and foremost. All right, if you're still here and you haven't turned away, thanks for hanging in there. The first thing that we often hear in couples, regardless, is 10, 15 years down the road, we see things like, we say things rather that this isn't the person I married. You've changed so much. I don't know who you are anymore. And that seems to be the basis for a lot of relationships just kind of drawing apart. They think the other person's changed. They don't see eye to eye anymore, and things go off the rails really quickly. Well, I've got news for you. Everybody changes.
That's for sure.
If you're in a marriage for 10 years, 15 years or longer, you have changed and your spouse has changed. That's the way life is. You've probably gotten into the career, they've started a career, you've raised kids, you've had the family dynamic going on for several years now, and things change. So you have to put that aside and can't use that as a tool against the other person. If you are a first responder, you have to take ownership because this job does change you. It changes you dramatically. Whether you think it does or not, it's going to change you. So with that, you have to look in the mirror and say, this job is changing me as well. You can't just blame it on the spouse and say they're not the same person. The job and the culture and the way that we work is going to make you a different person. I remember specifically one time I had gotten into a pretty heated argument with my wife. And at the end of the argument, she said, quote, "Okay, Officer Smith." And I paused because I was extremely taken aback. And what did I want to do? I wanted to be right. So I said, "It's Detective Smith, and don't try to correct me again."
People, you big jerk!
And I hear this a lot. Being a detective, I was really good at interviewing people, and I was putting my wife through a police interrogation. And I'd had a corrections officer come up to me at one class during a break when we were talking about relationships. And he said, my wife came up to me one day and said that I talk to her and I treat her like an inmate. And I said, "You do. How many hours a day do you work? 10, 12 hours overtime? You're in that culture, you're doing your job, you're sweet at it, but that's how you communicate with people. And if you're not very, very intentional, you don't shut that off when you come home. So you bring that home, and after time, that change is inevitable. So first and foremost, understand that you have changed and your spouse has changed after several years of you being in your career and them being in their career, no matter what it is. So that leads me right into the biggest thing is the communication. Now, there's been thousands of books written on communication. Therapists and counselors have made big money off of lack of communication when they're counseling married couples. And really, we will hear oftentimes that communication is the key. Well, what does that really look like in your relationship? We hear oftentimes that most marriages break up because of two things: sex and finances. And I challenge that notion by saying most marriages break up because they don't communicate about sex and finances. That's the bottom line. That communication goes out the window.
It sure does.
And those wants and needs are not met. Which leads me into the next thing. One of the main reasons I don't think that we communicate very clearly is because we, as first responders, are afraid to be vulnerable. We're afraid to let our spouse know what our wants, desires, and expectations are because of that pride. Because if we're vulnerable and really say, like, I need more time with you, I need more of a relationship with you, I need more of a friendship with you, that makes us drop our guard and become vulnerable. And we might be afraid that that is going to be used against us at some point. So we put up this barrier. We think that our spouse should know us by now and should know our expectations, but that's not the case. You have to communicate that. So typically for men, we want what? The three S's: sex, sleep, and silence.
I can't believe you just said that.
And our spouses want communication. They want to know how our day was. They want security. And those two things can bump heads and cause a lot of problems because we think the other person is a mind reader. So fellas, if you are the first responder and you come home or your spouse comes home, it's that few minutes of communication. It's explaining to them how your day went, not the gory details, but just overall. If you are upset, don't want to talk about it, you need to learn ways to communicate that. And when you give your spouse that communication, that time, and you serve them with their wants and their needs, then it will come back to you in return, if that makes sense.
It's about time somebody finally came out and said it.
We can't go into relationships and think that like they should know we want sex. They should know that we just want to chill out for a while. If you don't communicate that, and if you are not giving your spouse what they want, what they need, and what they desire. So in essence, my wife is a very communicative person. Her gift is her love language. One of her love languages is physical touch. So she wants to come home, give me a great big hug, ask me how my day was, and then we go on from there. Now, when she comes home, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I've checked out for the day, and I don't want to talk about what's going on. But I have to drop my pride, I have to be vulnerable, and I have to communicate to her with a great big old hug and tell her how my day went. And then moving forward, that gives her that security, that gives her that vulnerability to open up. It makes her feel that her needs are being met. So on top of the communication of wants, needs, desires, and expectations, you also have to be open and willing to serve them in what their wants, needs, desires, and expectations are. And then it kind of reciprocates, if that makes sense. Again, in our marriage over the years, this is one of the key things that caused problems between us. I would come home and I would be still wound up from work. I couldn't communicate to her that I just needed some time. And when she would come home late or come home at different hours, she wanted to know how my day went. Of course, I'm checked out. I don't want to talk. I don't want to go through it. And then when we did talk about it, I was very short. I was very like, well, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to talk about? The dead kid that I had to go on today. And so I put up this barrier in this front because I was afraid to be vulnerable with my own wife. I was afraid to say like my day sucked. I had to go on a dead kid call and it really bothered me. And that lack of vulnerability would turn into a wall where I was trying to protect myself. And then I would communicate with her very coarsely or very matter of fact and be very quick to respond. And we continued to butt heads.
You jerk.
Another thing that happened was that I was really with that facade. I could not communicate like what I really needed because I was extremely prideful. Like I said earlier in the video, I would get to a point where I had to maintain that emotional detachment that I would bring home from work. You have to emotionally detach as a first responder. So when you come home, you're still holding up that barrier. So it became very difficult for me to really tell my wife like, hey, this is what I want. This is what I need, and this is what I expect. And we say expectations, it's not a bad thing. You have to communicate that in order to open up the conversation. So once I started communicating with my wife of like, this is how I feel when I come home. This is what I want when I come home. These are my desires. What are yours? And keep the emotions out of it. And don't come into the conversation saying, well, you should know what I want. Well, this is what I want, and this is how I want it. It's a back and forth conversation. And I'm going to be very honest with you. This is very hard work. This takes a lot of patience. This takes a lot of time. This takes a lot of work because oftentimes you will communicate something, you will come to an agreement, and then you expect things to change immediately, and they don't. So then you get frustrated, and then you go right back to fighting.
Oh, you want to fight? You want to fight?
So if you can start right there with that honest, open dialogue, it doesn't matter whether you think you're right or wrong. When your spouse is communicating with you, one, let them finish because we're fixers, doers, and problem solvers. We want to cut the other person off and explain to them how, no, you're wrong. No, this is how I feel. No, this is what I mean. You'll have that chance, but let them finish. Let them tell you how they feel. Let them communicate fully to you what's going on in their lives. So then you can counter that and say, I didn't mean it to be that way. Because a lot of times it's simply a misunderstanding, but we take it as you're doing this, you're doing that. And what can turn out as a misunderstanding will turn into a fight very, very quickly. So don't let it get out of control. Keep your emotions in check, which is another thing that's extremely hard to do. And if you can do those two things, you're going to be well on your way to healing this relationship. So let's go back real quick. First and foremost, you have both changed over time. It's inevitable. The career is going to change you. You can't use that as an excuse to fire off any way you want because you've had a bad day, because you're extremely stressed out or burned out for work. Your spouse is there as your helpmate. They're there to help you out. And you two need to come together and be able to communicate openly and vulnerably about wants, needs, and desires in the relationship.
Amen.
The second thing is keep your emotions out of it. Let the other person fully communicate to you how they're feeling and what they're going through until they are finished. And then you can come back with careful choice of words and express yourself to, that's a misunderstanding. This is what I want. This is what I meant by that. And the conversation can continue. Again, it's super hard work. It takes time. The two of you have to be willing to continue to press in because there's going to be times where it works for a minute and then there's an issue that comes up. So you have to be patient with each other. You have to love each other. You have to serve each other. If you put these things into play in your relationship, I guarantee you it's going to make a difference. I've survived. I don't want to say survived.
Busted!
That's a bad. Our marriage has survived some humongous ups and downs over almost 28 years now, but we've managed to stay together through an entire law enforcement career, and we are still working on things as we move forward. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be things that come up, and you need to be willing to work at it. That's the problem. People don't want to work at it. It's so easy to split up. It's so easy to get divorced. But if you put these things into play and do exactly what we spoke about today, it will make a huge difference in your marriage and your relationships. All right, everybody, that's it for today. I hope you got something out of this video in order to start healing your relationship and your marriage. We'll talk more about raising children in upcoming videos. So I'd appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. We can get this out to more of our first responders. Tap that like button, and that's it for today. We'll see you at the next one.